Unless Eugenia wants to sit and listen to everything.
It's going to be a long one, I know. We'll see. Okay. I'm going to start letting in everyone else.
Oh my goodness.
Gallery view.
Okay.
So I went off.
This-
I think that's everyone, and it's being the recording has started and the meeting is being live streamed.
Okay, before I'll call the meeting for Norwalk into order. The roll call, we have all the commissioners here. Kelly Bloom, David Westmoreland, Mary Peniston, myself, and Lisa Cooper. Is there any public participation for Norwalk? Seeing none, I will go on to item number 4 on the agenda, administration. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes of the February 20th, 2024 special meeting? Somebody? Mary makes the motion, I'll second it. Anyone have any changes, additions, deletions? None? Everyone shaking their head. All in favor? Aye. Approve unanimously, I believe. Move on to item B, financials. Approve the Norwalk Housing Statement of Revenues and Expenditures and Balance Sheets for all funds for the year-to-date March 31st, 2024. And I'll turn it over to Eugenia.
Thank you. For the period year-to-date, March 31st, 2024, the Norwalk Operating Fund 400 had revenues of $25,000 and expenses of $8,000, which resulted in a net operating surplus of $17,000. And then the balance sheet for this fund had assets of $755,000 and liabilities of $371,000, with a total net assets of $384,000. Then going to Norwalk Revolving Loan Fund 450, it had an operating surplus of $2,300.
Hey, George, just want to make sure you are on, okay? No one.
Excuse me. All right.
And the balance sheet for Fund 450 had total assets of $126,000 and total liabilities and net assets of $126,000.
Okay. Does anyone have any questions, additions, deletions to those financials? Seeing none, I believe I made the motion to approve the statement of revenues and expenditures. All in favor? Unanimous. Thank you. Seeing no other business for Norwalk, I have make a motion to adjourn this meeting. All in favor? Unanimous. We'll move on to the Norwalk redevelopment agenda. It's obviously called to order, the roll call. We still have all the commissioners here. And now we have a public participation. I understand we've received a number of letters, emails, which we'd like to have read into the minutes. So I'll turn that over to Katie.
Okay, we do have a few letters that we've received. I'm going to read them exactly as they're written. The first was an email sent on April 30th, 2024 from Charles Schoendorf. Quote, I oppose the demolition of the historic buildings at 25 and 3135 South Main Street in Norwalk, Connecticut, end quote. To demolition, what little is left of historic Norwalk is to write off what is left that defines Norwalk as the unique and charming city it should strive to remain. Charles Schoendorf, Norwalk resident and taxpayer since 1973. That's 51 years. Thank you. The next was sent by Danny and Vivian Grundman. It says, Dear Brian Podoli, please find attached our recent email to Mr. Kleppen and Mr. Levine. Thank you, Danny and Vivian Grundman. Included is an email sent on April 30th from Danny and Vivian Grundman. Dear Mr. Kleppen and Mr. Levine, please do not allow the tearing down of Norwalk, Connecticut's historic buildings at 25 and 3135 South Main Street. We are devastated at the idea that the historic McMahon and Udelman buildings are facing possible demolition to make way for a new hotel. We feel that at this time, the last thing our precious city of Norwalk needs is another hotel. Many existing historical buildings on Norwalk's Washington Street were previously preserved and saved from demolition by architect Arthur Collins. As a result, this is a thriving business area today. South Main Street could be as successful as Washington Street with help from the city and the state. Please do not permit its historic and potential. Please do not permit its history and potential to be destroyed. Thank you, Danny and Vivian Grundman, 22 Adams Lane, Norwalk, Connecticut, 06850. The next was sent by Pat Genova, dated May 2nd, 2024. It says 35 St. Mary's Lane, Norwalk, Connecticut, 06851, April 30th, 2024. Dear Sir, I adamantly oppose the demolition of two historic buildings in the South Main and Washington Street Historic District, 25 South Main Street, the McMahon building, and 3135 South Main Street, the Udelman building, building for construction of a proposed new hotel. The changes proposed seriously impacts this area in a negative way, historically, visually, and most importantly, financially. The historical documentation demonstrating its importance is well established, but the visual changes irreversibly damages the character of this street that reflects original New England town design. As a professor of art at CUNY, my students and myself look at the importance and relevance of historical style in a given age. Study it. We travel to places that have retained its history. That this area has been nominated for a National Register of Historic Places speaks volumes. You need to seriously respect that and consider what is being proposed here. This area is condensed with mostly two-story levels of various historical styles, all adding to New England charm. This area reflects continuity, a visual cohesion, if you wish. Besides stripping away the character of the area, a large, modern, utilitarian building such as a hotel would tower over narrow streets, and its design further dilute its historical significance. The loss of these two buildings would irreparably damage the streetscape and would leave only one original facade surviving intact on the west side of the street. And finally, from a financial aspect, people go to places of interest. One only needs to look where places of interest attract visitors. My recent trip to the historical area of Mystic, an area very similar to Washington and Main Streets, demonstrate a high density of visitors. It was jam-packed with day tourists who enjoyed antiques, small clothing, and other specialty item shops. Our Washington and Main Streets have such meaningful potential and can be a major staging of all things that both residents and tourists enjoy. I urgently appeal to a decision that does not destroy this area's heritage or dilute its significance. Yours truly, Patricia Genova. And the last was sent by Benjamin Young this afternoon, dated May 14th. John Bryan, I know there is a redevelopment agency meeting coming up in about 10 minutes. There is a lot to go through in the comments I just sent for Ben is a member of the TMP, the Traffic Mobility and parking team. There's a lot to go through in the comments I just sent for 2535 South Main Street. So here is an executive summary for your benefit. 1, TMP is still opposed to their one-way driveway layout and wants a single two-way access point on the north side of the site. 2, TMP still recommends rectangular rapid flashing beacons, RRFBs, at the crosswalks across South Main Street. 3, TMP has a new detail for the performed thermoplastic sidewalks, quote, faux brick, which is not yet in the DPW standard details. We will provide this with our comments. 4, TMP would like to see a more analytical breakdown of how the timing and manpower for the valet parking operation can be calculated to make sure there is no queuing that spills back onto South Main Street. It was noted in SLR's response that ProPark, the valet parking company, is preparing a separate statement on expected valet parking operations for the site, but we have not received that yet. 5, there are some issues with the traffic analysis, both on the volume assumptions and on the model calibration, which need to be addressed. Even if the revision of the traffic analysis does not have any bearing on the decision-making by the commission, it is still important for us to have an accurate traffic analysis since these are often used for future studies. Thanks, Ben Young, Senior Traffic Manager, City of Norwalk, TMP.
Okay. Is there anyone else out there that would like to speak on this in public participation?
John, actually, if I can just add one more thing, Attorney Adam Black did also submit a letter, but he will be presenting during the design review as the intervener.
Okay. So
Yeah,
there's no other public participation at this point.
Chairman Igneri, or will you wait for the applicant to make its presentation, or is now the time to do that?
Let us get through to this subject.
Thank you.
So then I'm going to go on to the administration for Norwalk Redevelopment. Item A is the approval of the minutes of the April 9th, 2024 regular meeting. I so move it.
John, I
Yes,
just wanted to say Lisa's name was misspelled in several of the motions.
okay,
She got a new last name, Copper, instead of Cooper.
okay. Correct that right away. Any other changes, comments? Seeing none, all in favor of the minutes as adjusted? Aye. That's unanimous. Under administration B, we now have a motion to approve the Norwalk Redevelopment Agency Statement of Revenues and Expenditures and balance sheets for all funds for the year to date, March 31st. Eugenia.
For the period year-to-date, March 31st, 2024, the operating fund 100 had revenues of $1,237,000 versus a budget of $1,133,000, which resulted in a favorable variance of $104,000. The total actual operating expenses were $1,409,000 versus a budget of $1,432,000, for a favorable variance of $23,000. Legal expenses included are $25,000 for the 1517 Chestnut Street, which will be reimbursed to the agency. The operating deficit of $171,000 versus $298,000. The budgeted operating deficit resulted a favorable variance of $127,000. Going on to the balance sheet, this fund had $4,546,000 in cash, accounts receivable due to other funds, property, right of use asset, and other assets. And there's $1,650,000 in net loans receivable. Total liabilities were $3,391,000, and net assets were $2,804,000. The financial statements for the other funds are also included in the package. There were no major variances except for Fund 300, the CDBG revolving loan fund, and Fund 500. They both had operating
It's
deficits.
crazy. It's like it rewinded or something.
But we have billed and have been reimbursed for these amounts. And
Okay.
that's all.
Any questions, comments about the financials? If none, I made the motion to approve the financials. All in favor? It's unanimous. Now we'll move on to item 5, business, the design review of 25 and 31-35 South Main Street. Brian, I'll let you open this section here.
Yeah, thank you. So this is a continuation of a conversation we started at the last meeting. We have the applicant present along with our design reviewer, Frank Fish, and intervener, Adam Blank. So in terms of the sort of bill of play here, we'll hear a presentation from the applicant regarding their project, and then we'll give it to our design reviewer, and then from there, Attorney Blank can make his presentation. So I'll give it over to the applicant for now.
Thank you, Mr. Bedoli and Chairman Igneri and members of the Redevelopment Agency. My name is Liz Succi. I'm a partner at Carmody, Torrance, Sandak, and Hennessy. I represent the applicant TR Sono Partners, which is both a property owner of 31-35 South Main and a contract purchaser of 25 South Main. We appeared before this agency on April 9th to discuss the project and discuss concerns that were raised by your peer review consultant, Frank Fish and George Jacquemart. And we have some additional comments to share with you tonight. Present this evening is Colin Grothier, he's project architect with Binefield Architecture. Len DeAndrea, he's the project civil engineer of Rocco V. DeAndrea Engineering. Certainly Tom Rich, the owner, Alan Cosby, the project manager. Neil Alinsky of SLR, project traffic engineer. Kristen Sokic of ProPark, and also our architectural historian, Michael Devonshire of John Hurd Courtney. As I mentioned, the applicant is TR Sono Partners. The properties are 25 and 31-35 South Main. It's at the time of the submission of the application, these properties were zoned Washington Street Design District. 25 South Main is about 0.11 of an acre and has a 3-story building constructed around 1900. That's the McMahon building that you're talking about. 31-35 South Main is about 0.22 of an acre and has a 2-story structure circa 1927. That's the Udelman building. The Udelman building was the subject of a demolition permit application and discussion and hearing before the Historical Commission City of Norwalk last year. It was also analyzed and reviewed by the State Historic Preservation Office last year, and that office declined to further its investigation and closed its file in connection with the demolition of that structure. And that action was taken last year by the Historic Preservation Office and Council. We certainly appreciate the comments of BFJ in evaluating the proposal and the time that Mr. Fish and Mr. Jacquemart have spent with us last month and also further reviewing this application in ensuing weeks, and the comments that they have offered to you for your consideration. The project envisions an 8-story hotel, 100 rooms, 70 parking spaces, all provided by valet parking system. We believe that we strongly believe, and it's a loop system of entry on the north with an exit on the south. We believe that provides a more efficient and effective way for guests to arrive at the hotel, to disembark from their cars, to have their cars taken by the valet system. The valet then park them either in the below level or other levels of the parking structure. We believe it provides less areas for conflict within the parking area, so that those who are coming into the parking area can deliver their car. They don't have to worry about others who are then trying to make a turnaround on the inside of the structure, as would be the case, we believe, with the BFJ suggestion. So as I mentioned last time, and as Mr. Rich has also explained, and as has been described by our traffic engineer and others, we strongly believe that the one-way entrance exit as proposed is the more appropriate option. It provides a better circulation pattern for arriving guests, deliveries, the valet, and others. It provides an enhanced guest experience. It offers ease of access into and out of the site. There are no need for multiple maneuvers on the interior of the site, as the BFJ suggestion would create. It eliminates conflicts with vehicles entering, turning around, and exiting, as the one-way entrance and exit, as has been recommended, would create. It allows us to maintain a larger lobby area and gathering area on the first floor. And in order to achieve these, we have suggested ample warnings for pedestrians on the street, whether that be signage, a stop bar for cars exiting the southerly exit, or other markings that would identify exits and entrances to this particular site. Some of the exterior design suggestions that have been made, I know that Colin Grothier will go through those, and I believe my client is willing to adopt some of those. But the major, I guess, bone of contention, if you would call it that, is that we would truly prefer the loop system that we have suggested. We recognize that there are comments that we just received within the past half hour, again, from TMP. Some of the comments we would have to reevaluate. Some of the comments reflect conflicts with what Mr. Travers testified to last month, that TMP is not concerned with interior hotel operations, but the pedestrian experience. And we believe further discussion about our usage of the valet, adequacy of employees that serve that valet system, queuing it within the structure, and use of the elevators that are proposed are all interior hotel operations that fall outside the purview of TMP, as was mentioned by Mr. Travers during his testimony last month before the Planning and Zoning Commission. At this point, I'd like to turn it over to Colin Grothier. He can walk you through the design once again, show you any changes that we propose by virtue of the comments made. Then that will be followed up by Mr. DeAndrea, and then perhaps Mr. Olinsky for traffic comments if we deem it necessary to do so. I would suspect that Mr. Rich may also want to address this commission, but we look forward to your comments. So thank you for the time again tonight.
Thank you, Liz. Can everybody hear me okay? Wonderful.
Yes.
Pleasure to be
Yep.
presenting before you again. Do I need, let's see, where's the screen share? Everybody got the screen?
Yes.
It's fine.
Well, thank you. Sorry, I downloaded a Zoom update earlier, so jumped on the meeting. Let's go. That's everybody. So I'll truncate my remarks because I don't think the architecture is the focus of many of the comments, but this is an independent hotel. It's not connected physically to the adjacent hotel. The location, I think we're all familiar with it, is in South Norwalk on South Main Street, right here, surrounded by a bunch of tall buildings. The Residence Inn adjacent to it is one. The Bridge and Fire Insurance Company is also a very tall building in that area, and as well as the other structures across the street are also relatively great in stature. In terms of massing, the police department's also relatively large. So it's in some good context there, with a building of this scale being about 8 stories and 80 some odd feet in height. From a massing standpoint, we've designed it to be essentially 3 discrete facades. We feel like that breaks up the massing scale of the street pretty nicely. There's a larger mass in the middle, or maybe not larger, but wider. That's detailed a little bit similarly to the one Chestnut Street or the platform development, if you're familiar with that over by the train station, with these relief spandrels and pilasters and recessed windows. So there's some good articulation and shadow lines on that facade, along with the double height foyer lobby space for the main entrance of the hotel. And that mass sits very directly at the terminating vista of Haviland Street. So it's really front and center, very focal point of the building. We've got the flags and the marquee indicating the sense of entry there. So really should capture the presence on the street nicely and indicate that this is an important part of the building. The mass to the right, also a brick facade little bit more vertical in nature. Going to have punched window openings that'll be set into the brick veneer. As the drive entry, as you can see, double height drive court here with some artwork at the far end. The entablature breaks up the base, and then you have the cornice at the top. The adjacent mass also, you can see some people hanging out here. There's seen as a recessed balcony, very similar to the existing Sono Hotel there. So that reduces the massing of the mid volume and creates some more differentiation in the street facade. So those two masses are really the primary composition. And then we have this tertiary building mass that's kind of the bridge between the existing residence inn and this new hotel venture. That's a fiber cement panel, looking to use a higher quality fiber cement that's a little bit more durable, a little bit more rigid. And that would be a rain screen application. I think the reality of the install is that the windows are going to look a little bit more recessed with that installation than they're showing in the rendering. So that's the idea there, is that it's a contributing member of the composition of the street, but not one of the stars. The other two are seen more as the first foot forward and front door of the building. I'm going to do another rendering. This is just another view. You can see the articulation of the pilasters. The main facade, the marquee, the flags, double height lobby space. This is contemplated as the drive entry for the vehicular circulation in, and then this would be the vehicular exit coming out onto South Main Street. What we feel like we've done very effectively is diversified the facade both in horizontal articulation as well as vertical. One of the things that we've always heard from reviewers in the past about the design review guidelines in this district is that they're looking for a very strong base, midsection, and top. We feel like we've achieved that with the double height main lobby. There's a drop in the articulation of the base on the exit drive with the communal space above. And then this one also has a cornice line that relates to, but is not directly in line with the adjacent buildings or pseudo buildings, as it were, in the case of this central mass. And then we have the ultimate cornices up at the top and the balcony step back. It's very visible there. As an homage to the train tracks, we've got a little bit of a folly that's providing some engaging interest and kind of signifying something cool going on here at the hotel to passersby on the train, looking to do a pool in the courtyard there for the guests in a amenity or a function space that overlooks this rear courtyard, and just provides different spaces for hotel guests and patrons that rent space in the hotel to use for different things. And you can see the multi-level parking garage down here. Kind of shows a little bit more distilled of an articulation of the building from a higher level. It really does a little bit better job showing what's going on at the street level with the ins and the outs, and there being pedestrian walkways alongside the driveways for egress and ingress into the building, into the rear parking area. You can kind of see the marquee and how this relates to the crosswalks, and you can also see the step back a little bit more clearly here, and the allusion to a rooftop occupancy for a lounge or bar. Program-wise, lobby on the first floor with management offices, storage, excuse me, utilities, trash concealed in a room. Additional laundry facilities are in the basement up to the main level. Excuse me, typical hotel room layout. Rooms facing the street, rooms facing the courtyard. The rooms facing the courtyard have private terraces, elevated pool deck, multi-function space, large king suite. Typical layout. This is the elevated lounge area that would be available for people to rent. This is the level right before the roof. You can see the terrace now facing the street as opposed to viewing out over the tracks or the courtyard on the first level. And then we've got a rooftop occupancy with a lounge, some program there off at the main elevator lobby, screen mechanicals, and the potential for a solar array. Repeating the elevations, we've got brick is the main material, fiber cement panel, and cast stone along the base. I think that's pretty much it for my presentation, unless anyone has any questions.
Just not to do with the design, but just a question. Is the rooftop bar, will that be open to the public? I'm just curious.
Somebody from ownership, but I believe the intent is that it would be available for people to come in and
Yes.
use off the street, similar to the Residence Inn.
Thanks.
And the public space, how many people can it accommodate? Did I read it correct? It's 900 square feet on each floor?
You mean like the function spaces?
Yes.
So there is there's the main lobby, which not really a function space, but that's where guests can come in, check in, wait, do
No, the
other
ones by the
things.
pool, the ones
Yep.
by the pool.
So we do have a 435 square foot lounge, and then there's about a 900 square foot multi-function space adjacent to the pool, and then another 500, 600 square foot elevated lounge space.
I might be able to add some information on that question. I don't know if you can hear me or see me. Let me try to go to gallery view. Sorry.
Let's see you and hear you, Tom.
We can.
Okay, great. So we're not going to have a lot of function space at this hotel. It's not meant to be a hotel that's going to have a lot of meetings. We don't have a ballroom. It's you know, a limited service hotel. So, you know, the limited space that we have, if there are meetings there, they will be during the day for the most part. I mean, probably 95% of the meetings that we ever have there will be during the day, which is when our garage will be running at a lower occupancy, because people who are staying in the hotel, they leave in the morning and they come back at the end of the day. They either leave on foot or they'll take their car. But during the middle of the day when we would have meetings, of course, our garage is going to be operating as its lowest occupancy, leaving room for anybody who's coming here for a meeting to be able to park and be handled easily by our valet operation. Thank you.
I was just wondering if you had the number of how many people it would accommodate approximately.
About 30.
Thank you.
Yep.
Anyone else have any other questions for Mr. Grothier? Okay, hearing none, if it pleases the commission and the chairman, may we have Len DeAndrea just walk briefly through the site plan?
Please.
Thank you.
Sure. Len DeAndrea, Connecticut professional engineer with DeAndrea Surveying and Engineering PC, provided surveying and site engineering services. Colin, could you put back up slide A 0.02? That might be a nice, easy one to speak to. And why he's doing that, this site is existing trapezoidal sites side by side. I think it's a different slide I'm looking for. That was the overall plan view. I think it was A 0.02 in your lower right corner. It showed the plan view and the street view. There you go. Okay, yep, that was it. There you go. That's good for our discussion here. The existing conditions is obviously almost entirely building with a little bit of impervious in the back of the parking lot. There is really no drainage there now. I think there's one or two dry wells in the back. The new design will have a strip of infiltrators in the back part of the property that will infiltrate the roof drainage, which doesn't exist now. Inside, as you come out after the garage parking, will be an oil grit separator, so that's treatment that doesn't exist as well. The streetscape itself, all going to be redone, sidewalks, handicap accessibility. We've talked about the one way in and one way out. And what's important to note at this location on South Main Street, it's a very straight section of the roadway. There's no parking in front of our building nor a little bit to the north. So as you exit on the south end, you're going to have very good view lines both to the north and south and across the street to the intersection of Haviland Street. There was a comment that from traffic that they would like to see the horseshoe, the 3 street crossings. That can be accommodated. We'd have to shift a tree here or there, but we see no problem of having to, if we have to accommodate that 3rd crosswalk. Other than that, it's going to be bringing in the new services in the street, and there'll be a logistics plan prepared that will be modified as time goes on with the various departments to make sure that we can continue to pass pedestrians. We had shown pedestrians crossing over at a higher location to the north, thought that made sense. Sounds like the traffic would prefer to see a continuous walkway for the pedestrians. That could be accommodated, of course. So we don't see any reason why, one, it cannot be built in this location. Obviously it can. You get a nice new streetscape. And we think that the circulation of coming in on the north and coming on the south is very functional and very safe. And if we had one location again on the north side, it's just not nearly as efficient, and it causes the same amount of traffic one way in and one way out. So we think this provides great sight lines, and this is the preferred circulation we'd like to see. Other than that, this is fairly basic for us on the engineering side, and certainly will entertain any questions you may have.
And Len, I do have your submission set if you need to reference any of your sheets.
So far, so good. I think this is fine unless there's some other direct questions.
Are there any questions?
Yes. So as a pedestrian walking down the street in front of the hotel, when you're walking along the sidewalk and you get to one of the openings for cars, do you have to step down onto this, or is the sidewalk continuous across the drive, or is there a change in either grade in terms of ramping or a curb that affects the pedestrian?
Right. You can kind of see it in this picture at the crosswalk location. We don't like those anymore. This is, I believe the design in the comments were to keep this a flush walkway all the way across.
Are you talking about the car entrances?
Right. Sometimes you see this where you drop down.
Yep.
If you look at the crosswalk in the center there, as you come up, you see the ramp, and then you get to the sidewalk in front of the building. And that's
Right.
what is the preferred way to maintain this continuous across the 2 openings, so that you don't have a ramp down, ramp back up, go across, ramp back down, ramp back up.
So that treatment will be similar in front of what you have in front of the crosswalk will be the same as or similar. I mean, that's designed for wheelchair, obviously, but similar as the car entrance and exits.
That's right. It completely ADA accessible. Correct.
So it will be continuous across. There'll be no grade change at all.
That is the intent of what we're trying to accomplish here. Correct. Very, very little grade change.
Okay.
Any other questions for Mr. DeAndrea? Okay, at this point, since the question was raised by TMP this afternoon again, perhaps Christian Sokic of ProPark could address you briefly as to how the parking valet system works. And since he is the expert and the one who has been handling not only this system, the one next door, but also the Courtyard by Marriott in Stamford. Kristen?
Hi, hi, good evening, board. My name is Kristen Sokich. I'm an executive vice president for Park Mobility. I've been in the parking industry now for over 25 years and managed many hotels in the tri-state area. Based on the plans with the loop configuration, there would be one-way traffic coming in, one-way traffic leaving. The parking would be handled on a managed basis. There would be a valet captain on the ground level. We have enough queuing space in that configuration for 10 cars. We have ample parking on the ground level for another 26. So any waves of demand, either when people are leaving in the morning, checking out of the hotel, we'll have already staged those cars in the evening time on the ground level to leave. In the late afternoons, when most people are checking in, we will manage the ground level so that the majority of the spaces that are there for parking and for queuing are empty, allowing for cars to have plenty of opportunity to pull in and not hinder folks that are trying to leave or block anybody in whose car may be on the ground floor. The the operation itself lends itself to a much safer parking environment. There'll be no U-turns, K-turns happening in this configuration, whereas with the side-by-side entrance and exit on one side, you'd have people, making turns in front of the elevators. The elevators are going to be, a high trafficked area because you got a floor parking below and a floor parking above. That's really not space where you want to have cars kind of coming in to do turns for that reason. And, basically this configuration is more conducive to getting cars in and out. It's safer, more customer friendly, and it's basically how a lot of hotels operate that have Porto shares. And I don't see why this would be any different.
Any questions from the commissioners or anyone else? Just I have one. You're going to be parking the cars down below and up above using the elevator. Someone's leaving. They come out the elevator. Where did they stage to get into their car? In front of the,
They're going to be the customers will wait right outside the doors of the doors that lead into the hotel lobby.
so they'll be here.
But
in this.
the customers don't go on the vehicle elevators. It's only the valets. Correct,
Okay.
right where the point.
Okay. Got it. So they come out the elevator and just go around. Okay. Any other questions? David? No?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And
Seeing
last,
none?
I'm sorry, excuse me.
Go right ahead.
I'm sorry, did I interrupt someone? If I did, I apologize. Okay, at this point, I'd be appreciative if Neil Alinsky of SLR, who provided the, excuse me, who provided the traffic analysis, could reiterate some of the commentary that we shared last month about traffic and volumes and other the sightlines and other information that was in our traffic report, which was submitted to Planning and Zoning Commission. I know it's outside of the redevelopment agency's review capability, but I think it might be somewhat instructive to hear from Mr. Alinsky as to what the traffic analysis revealed.
Good evening. For the record, Neil Alinsky with SLR Consulting. I'm actually filling in tonight. Nick Kavan from our office and Dave Sullivan could not make it, so I'm filling in. Although I am familiar with the project, I think what it boils down to is really the access. Not going to get too far into the weeds in terms of the full traffic study we did, but we didn't find any impacts to off-site intersections that would be expected. So we're not expecting any traffic impacts to off-site nearby intersections. Really, it comes down to the question about the driveway or the driveways. And what it comes down to is the site has on-site park. The development is going to have on-site parking. You're going to need to get vehicles in and out, thus, in one way, shape, or form. And really, in a sort of tight city type of environment like this, having driveways, either configuration is really neither configuration is a slam dunk. But what we have proposed, what you see in front of you, is what we feel to be the best option. You've heard that this one-way sort of circular flow with one-way in, the northerly driveway and one-way out. Southerly driveway is most efficient for this proposed use. It will minimize the number of A-turns and things like that within the site, which are not great. This is simply good. It's just better in that regard to have one way in and one way out. I could tell you anecdotally as a pedestrian on the sidewalk, again, having a curb cut in a city environment is not a slam dunk. It's not perfect. Nothing is. But having narrower driveways is good. And what we have here would be two driveways which individually would be narrower than a single two-way driveway. Single two-way driveway to walk across as a pedestrian is not as good as what you have here, in my opinion. Not only that, but with single direction one-way driveways, the pedestrian only has to be concerned with traffic entering or exiting the site in one direction at a time, as opposed to a two-way driveway where there is much more going on at one particular spot. So with a two-way driveway, a pedestrian at the sidewalk has to be looking in both directions, see if cars are coming into and out of sight from both directions. Whereas what you see in front of you would simplify that, and the pedestrian could take one driveway, one direction, sight traffic at a time. As you heard, sight lines are expected to be adequate from these proposed driveways. And all things considered, we feel that the two driveways, with them being one-way driveways, is the better option. And lastly, we do acknowledge that the proximity to the residence in driveway at our southerly exit, it is proximate, it is there, but it's not overly concerning given that our site driveway, the exit driveway, will just be one direction flow. And it's just, this development is not expected to generate a whole heck of a lot of traffic at all. I think, as you heard from the BFG peer review, their latest peer review, and our report, our original traffic study as well, this development is not expected to generate a whole heck of a lot of traffic. There's not going to be a constant stream of exiting traffic from our site. I think that pretty much covers what I wanted to say, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
If I may ask, the exiting traffic, can they turn either way, or do they have to only turn in one direction?
We're proposing that they can turn either direction. I think in our traffic study, we have, based on the roadway patterns and obviously the site is south of I-95, we think a lot of the turns out of the site will be left turns, which will not immediately conflict with the residents in the driveway. And lastly, another thing that we point out in our report is the speeds on South Main are quite slow. In fact, I think they're no more than 25 miles per hour, which is quite good in an urban environment. Slower speeds are better in an environment like this, and sort of help minimize any concern about turning left and or right out of the driveway.
But you do have, as you're exiting that driveway, if you decide to turn left, you do have other traffic coming into that street that might be turning left their left.
Mm-hmm.
So it would seem like you might have a bottleneck between the traffic trying to turn onto the street and the traffic coming out of the driveway trying to go left, north. So has that been looked at?
We're not typically terribly concerned about bottlenecks in urban environments such as this. There is congestion in city type of environments. I know Haviland is right there. I think that's what you're referring to.
Correct.
Haviland Street. I can tell you that the driver exiting our proposed site driveway and the driver at the stop sign controlled approach of Haviland, they'll be able to see each other. So they'll be able to negotiate turning onto South Main Street if they're looking as they should be in seeing other oncoming traffic.
All right. Any other questions? No, seeing none. Do you want to move us on,
Thank you.
Liz?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. I'm not sure if Mr. Rich would like to address you at this point. So Tom, would you like to do you have any comments you'd like to make at this point? If not, I have a few summarizing comments, and then we'd be happy to hear whatever questions the commission may have and also hear from Attorney Blank.
I'll say a few words, if I may. If Colin could put the drawing down so I could see the gallery view, that would be great. Thank you. I know it says Emmy Sasaki, but this is Tom Rich, FD Rich Company applicant, and thanks everybody for your time. I would just say, with regard to historic preservation, the best way, in my opinion, to preserve what's worth preserving is through robust economic development. The economic spillover effect from projects that we and others have built in the area are a very powerful tool to be able to save Washington Street, North Main Street, where the buildings are worthy of saving. If they're not worthy of saving, you've got to make a decision. Do the pluses outweigh the loss of these two buildings, which people are saying are contextual for the neighborhood? And as Liz pointed out earlier, one of them has already been declined to be taken up by SHPO, and its fate is sealed. It's going to be, there's a demolition permit that's about to be issued. I have a long history in historic preservation, and I know one of the letters that came in, they talked about Arthur Collins, who was a visionary saving Washington Street, and thank God that he did. But I also, on his coattails, let's say, was following him. And for 16 years, I held that street together. And trust me, it was not easy. And projects like this are going to help it continue to thrive. It's not been easy. And I think you all know there's been a continuous revolving door of tenancies there. Our problem is not overdevelopment, it's underdevelopment. It's got to be responsible development, but we need a critical mass of all types of uses in order to make sure that we have the dollars being spent, the tax dollars coming in, the jobs being created to save the things that are worthy of saving. And so that's just on that. With regard to the driveway, this is our preferred scheme. We think it's I don't think we should talk about it much anymore. We think it's a preferred operable operation to go in and slide through and come out. I want to make it clear, the single driveway scheme can work. It can. And if we all conclude at the end of the day that that's the only way this is going to get done, then that's the direction we'll have to go in. We're trying to convince you that what we're proposing is a better solution. Even BFJ said that the single driveway scheme for this project can work. And we agree, it can work. We just think it's an improved situation not having that. It's a little bit awkward, but there's no question it can work. And with valets in there, they'll make it work. They'll move the cars around. And as I said last time we spoke, if you want to see how a valet operation works in this neighborhood, you don't have to look any further than the Residence Inn next door, which runs a valet operation when they're at peak capacity. And we're going to be doing the exact same thing. The only difference is that we'll have elevators, which we've used very successfully in the past. They're a space saver is what it comes down to. So I think that's it. If anybody has any questions for me, I'm happy to answer. And I appreciate your time and listening. And thank you.
Commissioners, any other questions?
I was wondering if there was any response to the other recommendations that were made, for instance, on facade materials, or because there were a series of recommendations, not just the parking. And I'm just wondering if the applicants had any comments in regard to the other recommendations made.
I would leave that up. Let me just say, from my standpoint, I would leave that up to the architect. I know there's been a dialogue going on, and we're certainly open to suggestion. We think what we've put forth is a very interesting scheme, which has differing materials across the facade, and then also different depths where the building steps forward as you move north. I guess one of the issues has been that BFJ has recommended that the Hardy panel, which is the piece of the building that separates the existing Residence Inn from the new hotel, be brick. If that's what everybody wants, of course, we would agree to it. I think that it's, personally, I think that the transition that Bynefield has put together is better. There's plenty of brick on the building. The other two facades are all brick. And so to have this sort of nice transition material, giving it a little bit of a modern feeling to separate the two buildings, I think is a better design scheme, but we'll do whatever everybody wants. At the end of the day, it's not going to affect the project, but I think personally, and this is all, design is very personal. I think it's a better design solution to inject a little bit of modern materials in there. Otherwise, we're a neighborhood completely filled with brick, and it's boring, but that's my opinion. So I respect whatever you guys want to do.
So just typically we receive a written response to each point that our design reviewer makes.
Right.
You know,
Well, where are we with that? Where are we with that? Obviously.
So we're relying on the professionals who advise us, and I don't want to just
of course
over that.
But we're being responsive. I mean, I'm not sure exactly where we are with all the responses, but maybe Colin or Liz can chime in here. Thank you, David. I appreciate that.
Sure. Thanks.
Well, we did submit a written response dated April 17th to the comments that were received. But I think if I may speak for Mr. Rich, if there are other items or items in the design comments that we can incorporate, we would hope that we'd be able to make those changes and deal with that on a staff level, and not have to come back to the commission for changes that we're going to adopt that BFJ has suggested. I would hope that that would be something that would be acceptable. But we did respond in writing back in April.
So I haven't seen that document, and I did watch, for the record, I did watch the, I had to leave the last meeting on April 9th early to go to something else, but I did watch the video of the entire meeting. And I've gone through the what's posted, and I cannot find that document. And I would appreciate getting a copy of that.
I'd be happy to share that. I had asked the very same question of zoning staff this morning if the document that we shared, which was addressed to the chairman of the Planning and Zoning Commission and to Mr. Fish or Mr. Jack Marr, if that had been shared with Mr. Bedoli and the commission. I was told that it was, but we certainly can provide that to you.
I did not look at P&Z's website, but I looked at ours and I didn't see anything on it.
Does anyone else have any other questions of Mr. Rich? And if you would give me just a few moments, a few final comments that I'd like to make. As Mr. Rich indicated, if the agency determines that the one curb cut maneuverability is preferable, of course, it can work. but we would request that we be able to work with redevelopment staff and planning and zoning staff to modify the plans and not be required to return to the agency for those revisions. We strongly believe the proposal is consistent with the design guidelines that are suggestive in nature, not mandatory, as set forth in the urban renewal plan of the Washington and South Main Street Improvement Area 2 and the South Main Street corridor. We recognize this project recognizes that the South Main corridor has and continues to play an important role as a traditional commercial center for South Norwalk. That's page 1 of the report. It encourages private investment in the project area. It encourages new construction of architectural quality and scale consistent with the revitalized district, including the Residence Inn. It's page 2. Great effort has been undertaken to consider the urban design guidelines, and we're convinced that this new hotel will, quote, blend this new development into this harmoniously functioning area, page 10 of the urban renewal plan. This proposal will increase the taxes generated from about 56,000 today to over 400,000. Hotel taxes in excess of 700,000. I will likely generate 25 to 30 full-time jobs and 200 construction jobs. And there is a need for additional hotel rooms in the city of Norwalk, especially with the closure of the Doubletree Hotel. We believe this project is consistent with your guidelines. We believe that it's an exciting and beneficial addition to the streetscape, and that we hope that you would see the project as something that's beneficial to South Norwalk. We are open to additional comments with staff, and we would welcome that continuing dialogue after this commission renders its decision. That would probably be the most efficient way to get this project off the ground, moving, and address concerns that you've already shared with us. I have nothing further to add, unless Mr. Rich has something else to add, but this concludes our presentation to you. We just ask that the presentation that was made last month to you be made part of the permanent record on this matter. That's it. Have any questions? I'm happy to answer them.
Thank you.
As the next, might be helpful to hear from our design reviewer, and then I think we can go to Adam Blank if that works for you.
That works.
All right, so Frank Fish, I don't know if you have any responses or anything that you wanted to add based on your review of the project.
Yes, we've submitted a new memo. Let me give you a little bit of the background of that. And again, my name is Frank Fish. I'm a principal of BFJ Planning. With me this evening also is George Jacquemart, who's another principal of BFJ and has been involved in the review of the project. We did do an initial meeting, sort of a review memo after a site visit on April 3rd. And then also early in April, we had a meeting of the agency's staff, and that included redevelopment and P&Z and TMP with the applicant. So that coming out of that were some of the particular transportation recommendations. On the 16th, we gave both you and P&Z expanded memo. We went over the design issues, some of which David Westmoreland was going through and asking about. There's about 6 recommendations in there, basically on design. I think the building we felt had many very good design elements about it. We were trying to make some additional elements that might slightly improve it. But the purpose of our meeting, of our latest memo, was the realization that we had from the inter-office meeting and also presentation by TMP to the Planning and Zoning Commission, that a key element here, and this was referenced earlier, is, does this building have one access point to it, a two-way access point, or does it have the one-way system creating 2 points of access? And what we've simply pointed out in our May 9th memo, which I hope you all have, we sent it to staff last week. We point out again that our read of your redevelopment agency's design guidelines for the TOD district clearly says under site access, minimize site access, number and width of vehicular access points into and out of the site should be minimized. We do think that minimizing these to one access point makes sense. from a pedestrian point of view. It made sense to P&Z staff, to also redevelopment staff, as well as transportation staff. And what we did in this memo is just on page 2 of the memo, just put in the drawing, which is the applicant's drawing, which actually I guess it was Len was using, and it's entitled zoning metric slide, of the actual building, and it shows the adjacency to the Marriott Hotel. And what I'm getting at is those, if this had an exit to it, the proposed building, it will be 15 or 20 feet from the Marriott Residence Inn's access point, which is in and out, as Tom mentioned earlier. And also TNP wants and feels should be required here is a pedestrian connections, walkways across South Main, 2 of them, so that they have a full crosswalks section. And on our drawing, we just put in yellow where that would go. The architects referenced that obviously a tree would have to be, if that happened, one of the trees might have to be slightly moved, but it also, depending on the exact design, would end up right adjacent to, if not partly in, that one-way exit out of the building. So what I'm getting at is that exit on the south side of this proposed building creates an additional turning movements in both directions, as was said earlier. And it also conflicts, as someone had mentioned earlier, with the left turn out of Haviland and left turns out of the adjacent Marriott Hotel. So there are conflict points that are created there. I'm not saying that again, this is an urban environment, that there aren't many conflict points in an urban environment, but when you don't, in our view, when you don't have to create them, then why not try to eliminate that southernmost access point, which we feel is a violation of your design guidelines. I think everyone and staff at the P&Z said the same thing. So if that were eliminated, then the point becomes whether or not the one-way in and out makes some sense. I was very glad to hear the applicant say, yes, that could be done. And I think if that were to be done, it would improve the pedestrian situation on the street. You'd have one less access point. You would have fewer conflict points at Haviland and South Main. And you would have, I think, a better environment. And so the question became not so much the public sense here, which from a public sense and a street sense, having only one access point to the hotel, we think is better. But the questions became at the P&Z meeting, well, how does that work inside? And can that work? And I want to turn this over at this point to George Jacquemart, who did a sketch for you all that's in the memo, and let him explain why we think it works. It can work in the building. So George, if I may, give it to you.
Mr. Chairman, before Mr. Jacquemart goes on, could Mr. Fish or Mr. Jacquemart kindly send that memo to us? I don't believe I've received it, and I don't know if anyone on our team has received it. I've just checked emails to see if I missed it. But if they'd be kind enough to send that to us later tonight or tomorrow, that would be very helpful.
Sure. Both agencies, it was sent to P&Z, but with copies to Jonathan at the redevelopment on May 9th. So
I don't see it in our packet. And
We don't have it.
Can't.
We could arrange the distribution of that.
okay, very good.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is George Jacquemart with BFJ Planning, principal at BFJ Planning. If we can have the graphic that Frank just related to, there's another point before we get into the internal circulation aspect, or if I can share my screen. Let me try to do that, because there's another point I want to raise in regards that was said earlier in regards to the one-way narrow in, narrow out driveway. I disagree with some of that statements that were made. Okay, so you can see the drawing that Frank just related to with the movements in and out here. But the other point that I feel is very important is to look at, imagine a car coming out of this driveway here. The question of a narrow driveway inbound and a narrow driveway outbound. It is not true that a narrow driveway outbound is safer. Look at this particular driveway here. Where does the driver sit in the car that exits here? Very close to the corner. The cone of vision of this driver is very limited. And that's a situation that I consider as not being safe for a vehicle to exit at this location, because the driver is so close to the corner and has very limited sight conditions. It's not a question of sight distance, it's the cone of vision that the driver has is not an ideal location here. Whereas if we were to have widened this slightly, it doesn't need to be widened very much. The driver sits kind of in the middle of this driveway and has a much better cone of vision to the left and to the right, and a much better cone of vision to the left. So the two-way driveway here, the wider driveway, is, in my opinion, safer. And I disagree with the statements that were made earlier about single lane, narrow driveways. So the other point, we can go to the, I think, drawing of the. So here you can see the internal circulation. Before I get into the details of this, there are 2 points that were made this evening that I think are important to repeat. One is that this is a limited service hotel. It doesn't have big conference rooms. It doesn't have a restaurant. It's very limited service. And it has also very limited traffic. It's, I've seen a report by, I think, another objector to this application that references, traffic generation of a hotel. This is not a typical hotel. It's a limited service hotel, has very limited traffic generation. I estimate that the traffic inbound and outbound is in the peak hours is maybe between 10 and 15 vehicle trips inbound, 10 to 15 vehicles outbound. So that's one vehicle every 4 minutes or every 6 minutes. And so here you can see a kind of layout that we did, and I call this a worst case layout for in terms of the valet parking operation. So here we show two-way access point, so it's slightly widened from what we have seen today. We suggest a 2-foot kind of edge condition with a curb, 2 10-foot lanes, and a 4-foot sidewalk area for pedestrians to come in and out. And then here we show, instead of showing parking spaces, we should not have parking spaces on this side of the internal area. This should be designated as a valet hold area, an inbound valet hold area that's 7.5 feet wide. Remember, most cars are between 6 and 6.5 feet wide. So any inbound vehicles, they can wait here, they can stop here, they hand over the keys, and the customer goes into the hotel. And then we also have the outbound valet hold area where the outbound cars, they come here, they can, hold there, the hotel customer gets in the car and then drives out. There's still enough room. If we do want to have an UPS or FedEx vehicle enter, and here we're looking at an UPS truck that's like 24 feet long, which is relatively large. If we want that to enter in here, there's still enough room for that. You can see these blue areas for that truck to come in, and turn, make a hammerhead turn, and then exit again. And I say again, that's if those drivers decide to come in, which I think in most cases they will not, and they will park somewhere on the street. And I know the city, the TMP people are looking for an area where trucks can stand in along South Main Street. that's probably where they will stand, and then they walk whatever packages they have, they will walk them to the hotel. But again, the purpose here is to show that if that's a desire, there is enough room for the UPS truck to come in, make a hammerhead turn and exit again, and pass through this area here. So this is typically, if you look at valet operation, there is an area where you want the inbound vehicles to be able to hold, and sometimes there's more than one vehicle, there may be two vehicles, and the same for the outbound vehicles. This is the ideal location for the outbound vehicle, where the customer comes out of the hotel door here and gets into the car and then exits. Because otherwise, there's not that much room for, if we accept the one way in and one way out where the vehicles exit here, there's not a lot of room where those outbound vehicles can be stored, for the customer to come and pick it up. So we feel this can work. As I mentioned, the parking supply in this project is relatively high. The parking ratio that's proposed in this application is 0.83 spaces per room. ITE suggests, they recommend for what's called a limited service hotel, a ratio of 0.66. So we would recommend that the parking spaces that are designed in the application along this area be eliminated, and that this becomes a proposed, like a valet hold area where cars are just dropped off and the key is transmitted and so on. So that's basically the way we see this operating. Again, this is not a porte cochere. A porte cochere is typically in front of the hotel. We have to remember the main entrance to the hotel is off South Main Street. It's not the back of this, in this parking area. So we feel that, and we agree with TMP that this is a better area. It's safer for pedestrians along, and also more convenience for pedestrians along South Main Street. That's basically our presentation. I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have.
I'm sorry, if I could just interrupt really quick before the questions start. This is Katie. I just want to let everyone know, the commissioners, this memo dated May 9th from BFJ, it is part of the agenda packet. So if you want to take a look at it, you should find it there.
And I just forwarded it again to you all and the commissioner. I sent it to Attorney Suchi.
Okay, thank you. Any questions? If not, I don't hear any, I will move forward.
John, could I just ask, are there any other things that that the people that reviewed this want to raise besides just the parking issue?
And I think the facade stuff.
I just wanted to make it explicit about, because since maybe not everyone saw the memo, if they wanted to make comments on anything else, because this was not the only recommendation in that memo.
Okay, Mr. Fish.
Yes, what I can do briefly, in the memo, we had about 6 design or half dozen design points, and I think that Colin has tried to cover those in his presentation a little bit, but very briefly, they were that they did a good job, we think, on the vertical sections, 3 sections of the building. We were just raising the horizontal breaks, could mimic the scale of the adjacent buildings to the north a little bit better. And Colin pointed that out, where they have not matched that exactly, but they have tried to relate to it, but it hasn't been a clear match. But the second one was just to punch the windows a little bit in size and style to the second floor windows of the proposed building by looking at the way the windows in the adjacent buildings, which have historic quality to them, and how they were done. And then we also noted the adjacent buildings, and actually some of the buildings that would be torn down. They currently have some recessed pedestrian entrances. I think it's relatively minor, slight change to get those entrances that to this hotel proposal that have doors off of Main Street, including the main entrance door, to be slightly recessed. The fourth comment was a solid base below the plate glass windows. If they could consider a solid base, that would echo the design of the neighboring buildings or the existing buildings that are there now. And then a fifth point was, and particularly now, if the redevelopment agency and the P&Z make a condition of approval that there only be one access here, you would have the ability to better, I think, address the gap between this proposed building and the Residence Inn hotel. Relatively minor, but we don't see how that really is addressed. And I think it could be addressed by the architect. They have addressed many of the things very well. So, and then I think materials, we don't want the applicant to feel that we're demanding all brick. We're not. We just finally made some comments on materials. We like a lot of the choices they've made, but some of the materials we thought could reflect a little bit more of what's there. And they may have an opportunity to do that actually if the exit, which we feel is not needed, that is a driveway exit, is eliminated, they might have a better opportunity to do that. So those were sort of the recommendations, but the key thing I think that the agency staff and TMP are concerned with is this to get the building to comply with one of the major elements of the TOD design guidelines, and that is to minimize auto entrances.
Thank you. Any other questions? Anyone else want to make a statement before we move on to?
I would just like to get a copy of that Mr. Fish's memos, because I still cannot locate that in either last month's or this month's packets.
David, I just sent you another email just for reference, just so you have it. If you need me to send it again, I'm happy to do so.
Oh, I haven't looked at email. Okay.
Mr. Chairman, this is Mr. Rich. Mind if I ask a question?
Not at all. Go ahead, Mr. Rich.
Thank you. I was wondering, I had a question for Mr. Jacques Mart. And I just curious what your thoughts, well, before I ask the question, we're a little further away from the exit of the Residence Inn than was said earlier. We're about 30 feet away from the exit. And so we're having an exit up. We were proposing our exit on the south, and the Residence Inn's exit is also their southern driveway. Those two driveways are, just to set the record straight, are about 30 feet apart. We're closer to their entrance driveway. But the question that I have is, what if we suggested reversing the circulation and this became our entrance? And we were exiting on the north. Does that do anything?
Well, yeah, I think, as I said earlier, one of the key points, besides these conflicts that we are trying to manage, in a relatively compact location, whether it's 20 feet or 30 feet is not such a critical element. But the safety concern that I mentioned is related to a narrow driveway where the driver sits very close to the corner of the building, the corner that's created between the driveway and the facade of the building, and where the driver has very limited sight conditions of people on the sidewalk. And you can see that if you look at the screen here, the driver here is very close to this particular corner, and the pedestrian that walks where these sight conditions are not very good. And whether you do that kind of one-way driveway here or one-way driveway there, it's the same situation. So I think in general, a two-way driveway, puts the driver in the middle of this driveway, and the cone of vision is much, much better, and the driver can see the pedestrians on both sides much better.
I just so I'm clear, and I didn't want to get into a debate, I'm just throwing it out there for some thought. If you moved the entrance to the southern, I'm not sure if this is a great idea. I mean, to the southern portal, you're eliminating the problem with the sight line that you purport exists coming out. So now they're just going in there. And if the northern driveway were left in the same width, obviously now you have much more room to see because it's a little wider, taller, etc. And I just didn't know if some variation of that could work and might change your opinion about the one way in and one way out if we reversed the circulation. So that just to be clear, that's what I'm talking about. And I'm not advocating it. I'm really we're trying to solve a problem.
Yeah, Tom, just so it's Frank Fish again, just one thing though, we're looking again, our charge partly is to look at, the design guidelines that are, applicable to any particular district. So
I get it.
Find that, the design guidelines here, that it's just two entrances, no matter how they're done, are not as good. They don't comply with the guidelines as well as one entrance.
Look, I think the job for the commission here and for the zoning board is they've got to listen to both sides and kind of decide what they want to do. Our experts are saying it works, that you guys are saying that it really doesn't, and that this is better. As I said, we will abide by the decision. I think we've all made our debater points, if you will. I just really feel the minimal traffic here. I don't know. I think we've beat this to
Yes.
very well. You know how I feel. So I won't say anymore. I don't want to waste any more time on this. I appreciate your patience.
Thank you, Mr. Rich. I agree.
Can I just
We could debate this all night long. I think we should try to move on.
Chairman
have-
Igneri, can I just speak to Mr. Fish's points really quick? And Tom, sorry, just
Not at all. I'm done. Thank you.
Sure.
yeah, just to the design elements. I don't think we have any objections to working with staff on those. I think in our written responses, we feel most of the items like the window recesses, the recessed entry, the solid base, all of those are surmountable and probably aren't expressed entirely, in a real sense in the rendering quite as well as they could be. And as it's constructed would probably achieve the desired effect that Mr. Fish and the BFGA reviewers are going for. As far as the material in the recess, I agree that, if the commission goes in the direction of eliminating one of the entries, we'd have a little bit greater of an opportunity to explore that. And we'd like to work with staff, zoning or redevelopment in order to achieve that, so that it's a more cohesive building and more excellent contributor to the street. So we're open to that, and I think we can make all those design elements that EFJ has raised work. So
Okay. Thank you. I appreciate that. It seems obvious that everyone wants to try and work this out. I'd like to propose, if no one else wants to make a statement about this, I'd like to propose we move on to Mr. Blank and see what he has to say before the commission makes a decision. So, and not hearing from anyone else, I'll turn it over to Adam. Are you there?
I am. Thank you, Chairman Igneri. And I think in a minute I'll share my screen. So I don't know if whoever's sharing now, if they can stop, and then I'll start up in a minute. So I'm Adam Blank. I'm the attorney for HOSP Nor CT RE LLC, which is we've intervened in this proceeding, and for ease, where the Marriott Residence Inn immediately next door. That's my client. And I want to get it sort of out in the open here rather than in the background, but right, so we own the Residence Inn. The Residence Inn is opposed to this development for a couple of reasons. And in big picture, we have safety concerns, and big picture, economically, we think it's going to be damaging for us. And the applicant is here saying they would like to demolish two-story buildings and put a large 8-story building in its place because they think that economically that's in their interest, that they can make more money with that than what's currently there. And I don't think there's anything wrong for either side of wanting to do what's in their economic interests. And we are here, and the arguments that I intend to make for you tonight are really what we think is our obligation, is to make them comply with both the zoning regs and with your design review guidelines. And we don't believe the application complies, and it should be denied irrespective of the fact that we're their competitor. They've got to comply, and it doesn't. I'll take probably 10 or 15 minutes of your time. I'm going to try to be really brief. We've also submitted a whole bunch of materials, which I hope have found their way to you. I'll talk about that in a second, but I've not asked those folks to present to you tonight. You have all of their reports and their CVs as part of the record. So this hopefully will be fairly brief. With that, let me share my screen. Okay. All right, with that up, you can see my screen, right? We're all good?
Yep.
Okay, great. All right, so we don't think it complies with your design review guidelines. One, the demolition of the 2 historic structures is incompatible with the redevelopment plan and design guidelines. It will create unreasonable traffic congestion and pose a safety hazard for motorists and pedestrians, particularly with respect to this driveway issue, which I'll touch on but won't kill because you've touched on it quite a bit already. And we have some serious concerns about the valet system handling peak demand. And your peer reviewer found non-compliance as well. And you've heard from him tonight, and we're going to highlight just a couple of things from his report for you. You should have a report from Tim Norduer and Malcolm McLaren of McLaren. They're traffic engineers detailing flaws in the applicant's report and concerns. You should also have from Wes Haynes, he's a historic preservationist, a report on the historical context of the 2 structures proposed for demolition, their contribution to the South Main and Washington district. You've got a report from Cross Key Architects on the continued architectural and economic viability of the 2 structures that are proposed for demolition. And you have a report from Todd Bryan at Heritage Resources detailing the grant and tax credit programs that would help make preservation of the existing structures commercially feasible. Again, if you don't have any of those things, speak up. We'll make sure you get them, or your staff can make sure that you have them, but you should have them. The plan of conservation and development, I just want to quote one little piece from the POCD. The plan of conservation and development says, local historic districts also guarantee that the historic character of an area is preserved, which very often results in increased market value. Numerous studies have shown that designation as a local historic district typically increases market value and stabilizes value during real estate downturns. Historic preservation has also proven to be economically beneficial on a community-wide basis. And these 2 structures that are proposed for demolition are, in fact, part of a historic district. And I think it's really important to keep that in mind rather than trying to segregate them as if there was a single building out in the middle of nowhere or surrounded by all modern buildings that you could say, well, it's not the greatest architectural wonder, so we're gonna demolish it. The reason that everyone I think everyone, but hopefully everyone loves Sono is because of its historic character, and that only has that because it has the volume and the density of historic structures. And most of the developments we've seen in Sono have made an attempt to preserve if not all, at least one, when there are multiple, but a historic structure, and build something modern that fits in with that historic structure, rather than simply demolish all of the historic structures. And we have real concerns that if you demolish these two buildings, that sort of opens the floodgates to the same thing occurring up and down Washington Street, because you can cherry pick every individual building and point out that it's had some work done and it's not exactly how it was when it was originally built. And it could be more profitable if it was 8 stories instead of 2 stories or 3 stories, and therefore it should be demolished. The zoning regulations for this district, again, in intent, say the purpose of this zone is to preserve and enhance the character of the Washington Street Historic District, which again, this is part of, by preserving the existing buildings. Your TOD plan, which is what the design guidelines stem from, are replete with discussion about how the purpose of the TOD plan, it's not just to promote economic development, but it's actually for preservation of the historic buildings in the Washington Street Historic District, which is, again, what this is part of. It's in your goals and strategies: protect and enhance valued historic structures through adaptive reuse and historic preservation. Retain the traditional composition along blocks and streets where historic or traditional components remain substantially intact. Within your architectural guidelines, and this is your design review, existing historic structure should be integrated into any new development plan. New buildings, in addition, should complement and reflect the structure and style of any existing older structures. Historic structure should be considered for restoration, sensitive rehabilitation, preservation, or adaptive reuse. New development should integrate and leverage the value of the historic structure. So these structures, they are listed as contributing resources in North Norwalk, South Main, and Washington Street on the National Register of Historic Places of Historic District. And that's in the Haynes report. We've attached actually the National Register documents as well. They do contribute to the scale and overall historic quality of the street and the historic district. And they're architecturally significant. Look, neither one is the White House, right? They're not like the greatest architectural wonder in and of themselves, but their cultural and contextual significance is important, and they play a meaningful role in the preservation of the gem of Norwalk, that historic downtown. They are structurally sound and good candidates for adaptive reuse. You've got that from our architect Crosskey, and the properties have had tenants. They've very recently had tenants in them, so they could be adaptively reused and preserved. It's just not as financially successful as putting in a 100-room hotel. And that is, in this application, there was obviously a prior application that would have left 25 South Main intact. It didn't touch that. It would have demolished 35 South Main and added 50 rooms to the Residence Inn. That plan, you lost one building, you got your added hotel rooms, is very different than now taking down both structures and opening really the floodgates. So I'm going to move on from that point now. The traffic issue really is a problem for us. You had the BFJ memo that you were just discussing, which hopefully now is up on your screen. Our site is right here. We have real serious concerns with this exit here interfering with our folks coming in and out of our site. Also, one thing that hasn't been raised for you tonight is, so the applicant's not proposing any loading. There's no loading space for this hotel. So they're hoping that Ubers and Lyfts will drop off inside. Realistically, they're probably going to drop off out front. But any deliveries that they get, Amazon or scheduled deliveries, there's no loading area. You've got crosswalks here, and as soon as you get any car that parks in front of this hotel,
Adam, I'm
Yep.
sorry to interrupt, but I think we're seeing the wrong slide. I think you are intending on us saying
sorry.
something different.
Yeah, sometimes when you share, sometimes on the share, it doesn't switch. Sorry. Share screen. Well, I'll just have to do it this way. You should have that up now. Is that right? See the diagram?
That's the diagram of the
Yeah,
building.
great. So yeah, so this is what I meant to show you. So the loading, so where are taxis and Ubers gonna drop off? They're gonna drop off here, and which is a problem because of the crosswalks and the pedestrians. It's exacerbated when you've got cars parked here blocking the sight lines of cars coming in and out in both directions into these crosswalks. They've proposed as a solution to that problem that cars would in fact park on our site in front of the Residence Inn next door, which again we've got an issue with that because it is going to interfere with our deliveries. It's going to interfere with our guests, and realistically, you're not going to have folks parking, half a block away and then walking back to their hotel. They're going to just park in front of the hotel and drop off. We don't like the design with 2 driveways. We hate 1 driveway is better, but we don't think that works either. Their traffic study, this is their traffic study, not ours. And this is noted by TMP in their memo. Their traffic study shows a 2-minute delay for cars coming down Washington and turning onto South or North Main. Okay. This is a 2-minute delay caused by this site. They didn't look at what impacts that would have on the bridge or on Water Street. We believe that's an unacceptable impact on traffic. Again, it's noted by TMP. They asked about it, and the applicant's response really didn't dispute this. They just say that it doesn't matter how much delay occurs on Washington Street. It's already bad. The parking system. So there's no evidence this parking system will actually work. They've been asked by us. They've been asked by TMP. I think maybe they weren't asked by your peer reviewer, but they were definitely asked by us and by TMP. And at the last meeting, both Ms. Peniston and Mr. Bedoli raised the issue of is this system going to actually work? Because it's not just valet. It's the only way to get your car is with the elevators rather than ramps. Typically, you would do a queuing study that would show during your peak hours with however many cars you've got coming in and going out, how long will it physically take your attendant to get the car, to come back, and can they handle that load? And how many attendants will you have? And based on your elevator base, McLaren's done that many times. I'm sure that their traffic engineer has done that study many times, but they haven't provided it. They did, there's been talk about it being a light traffic generator, and compared to other uses, that's true. They use the ITE numbers for a hotel. Using those, it's the ITE. It's not like numbers that we're making up or manipulating. The numbers, their own numbers for the Saturday morning peak hour, say that they'll have 42 cars coming in and 32 cars coming out. That's the busiest time, is on a Saturday morning. 42 in, 32 out with those 2 elevator bays and not much room to queue. So there's been no proof that that parking system will work, and they don't have a right to it. They can ask for it, but they've got to establish that it's going to work before they get it. So we don't think it's going to work, and they certainly haven't established that it would work, and therefore we don't think you should approve this application. And again, in their responses, they've really effectively just said the valet is great and trust us, it'll work. And even tonight, they've not provided you with numbers. They've just said it should work fine. We don't expect any issues. In your peer review, stop the share and start it again. So, right, they also note that it's in the historic district. The proposed design has little cohesion with the surrounding context and historic district. We agree with that. The facade and massing of the building appear out of context with the existing scale of the neighborhood and adjacent 2- and 3-story buildings. Efforts could be made to create a more cohesive design. And of course, we agree with that as well. So I think those are really the principal concerns that we have. We don't think it complies with your guidelines, and I'll leave it at that, unless you have questions for me.
Any questions for Mr. Blank? Okay. Seeing none.
Mr. Igneri, would I be able to have the opportunity to respond?
Yeah, I'll give, yes.
Whenever that is.
Less than 15 minutes.
Oh, of course. If that's appropriate now, then that would be great.
Well, my concern, we could go on back and forth about this, but it seems to me that both sides are willing to work this out. Maybe that's the best way to do it at the staff level. But go ahead, Ms. Sachi.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Your evaluation is accurate. We are certainly willing to work out whatever we can and would be happy to work with the staff, whether it's redevelopment and/or planning and zoning, to come to mutually agreeable solutions. Just a few things, as Mr. Blank mentioned right away, this has really nothing to do with historic preservation. It has all to do with competition. Many of the comments and many of the objections that have been raised are the same features that exist with the Residence Inn: the massing, the height, the number of stories, the valet system, the fact that the owner of the Marriott Residence Inn was a co-applicant with the Mr. Rich and his project just last year to expand the Residence Inn onto 3135 South Main, and at that point had no objection to demolishing 3135 South Main or having the size of the structure, the density of the structure. So I think you have to look at that for really what it is. Anyone can cherry pick comments from the Plan of Conservation and Development. We all do it. But two things to keep in mind. The POCD is an advisory document. We are guided by the zoning regulations that exist. We are guided by guidelines from your urban renewal plan, and they are guidelines. They are not mandatory. And as I said last month, language is important. The guidelines talk in the terms of should or ought. They don't talk in terms of shall or must. There's a difference. And just like historic preservation, as Mr. Blank has indicated, is important, of course it is, but so is the economic redevelopment and initiatives that can transform the urban core and older industrial areas. That's right out of the Plan of Conservation and Development. That's what this does. I mentioned just language is important. Yes, the language in the zoning regulations encourages preservation. It doesn't mandate it. It indicates that language such as should is not shall or must, and these are guidelines. Keep in mind, you can impose them, you can modify them, but again, they're not mandatory requirements. You too have our historic preservationist, architectural preservationist report that was by Michael Devonshire, and he detailed the status of both buildings, condition of both buildings, and as I mentioned at the outset, 3135 South Main was not only reviewed by the city's historical commission, but by a separate third unrelated party, the State Historic Preservation Office, which determined that it was not worth saving and removed it from discussion. No loading spaces, and Mr. Blank talks about our site or our guests. The loading spaces at the Residence Inn are on South Main Street. They're in front of the building. They're not exclusive to South Main. They're open to everyone. As a matter of fact, as Mr. Travers mentioned at the Zoning Commission hearing last month, there seems to be some effort underway to consider loading along South Main because it's a concern, because of how it operates. So it's not specific to us. It's an issue that exists today. Everyone seems to agree, our traffic analyst, BFJ, that this is a light traffic generator. An issue such as traffic and loading are issues for the Planning and Zoning Commission. I respectfully suggest that they're not issues for the redevelopment agency. The facade and the massing, as I said at the outside, is out of context. Well, we agree, but we don't agree with that. But it's the same massing and the same massing design, number of stories as the Residence Inn next door. So I think the commentary about how this is a question of safety and traffic and all the others, that's really just wrapping itself around the underlying reason for the disapproval is that it's competition. And that's not what this commission or any other commission can consider when you move forward. I have nothing further to add. I don't believe any of our Mr. Rich or any of our consultants have anything further to add. We would just ask that you consider what we've presented, consider that Mr. Rich is willing to work with the staff. And if this commission deems it appropriate that it not be a loop system, it be a one-way system, as he's indicated, we're happy to do that. And we will work to make the building, materials, the windows, the entries more consistent with what BFJ has suggested. So thank you for your time this evening. If you have any other questions of me, I'd be happy to answer them.
Any other questions? Seeing none, I thank you. I guess it comes down to the commissioners now. There are several ways we can go, and I was going to propose that we approve the application subject to TMP and BFJ's findings, so that you can deal with the proper channels, the zoning and so forth to move things along. And I throw that out for discussion. David, Mary?
I would just like to ask that you clarify about what we're not voting on, because I think there's some things that are not in our purview, and given some of the public comments at the beginning, could you just clarify about what we are able to vote on and what we're not able to vote on?
Brian?
Yeah, so specifically, obviously, our purview is related to what's included in the design review plans, and that's been gone through by Frank Fish in terms of the aesthetic of it, the design, configuration, circulation, and how it affects the overall community. It's obviously a very large document, so the purview is somewhat general. So I think going through each and every item I would just point you in the direction of that. But it's basically related to what was contained in the report, as that review was conducted by Frank Fish, our third-party reviewer. So I think it'd be related to what's in Frank Fish's report and the comments received, obviously, from the departments, including TMP.
So I just want to respond to the public comments because there was a request to vote against, and I'm not sure that's the purview of what we're being asked to vote on. That's what I'm asking, just to make sure that those public comments get addressed.
You're being asked to, look at if it's compliant with the designer, the design guidelines that we have in our the South Norwalk plan.
Thanks.
So to be clear, it isn't about the TOD development plan or the POCD with regard to historic preservation, that we're not voting on that.
There are a number of, enhancements to maintaining the historic, character of the community in the design guidelines. So there is reference to historic quality in that, but it's not specifically related to the documents that you're talking about.
Is that clear, Mary? I mean, it's, are we to consider the demolition of the buildings and the impact to the historic character of the neighborhood?
I think it's all part of, yes, I think that is part of the consideration, and that's included in the design, in Frank Fish's memo. So I think I would limit it to the confines of that memo, because that's what his role as third-party design reviewer is to take a look at our plan, look at the project, see if it's in compliance, and then offer that as for your determination. Historic preservation is a tenet of that design review document. And again, I concur, Liz, Attorney Suchi talked about, the guideline aspects of this. So I think it's a little bit general, and that's why we rely on our third-party resource to give us that guidance.
Oh, okay.
Well, our third-party reviewer didn't say, he made suggestions on how to change the architecture. He didn't say not to do it.
Correct.
Am I understanding that correctly? That's how I read it.
David, I feel there's an obvious willingness by our reviewer, Mr. Fish, and the applicant to work out the design so that it works for everybody, including TMP and zoning. So,
well, it doesn't, So, I've spent 25 years in Norwalk working on historic preservation in my that's all I have done. Everybody knows that. So this is a very difficult one for me because I agree with, generally with the concerns that Adam Blank point out. But I also agree with Mr. Rich. You can't have historic preservation without economic development. And I do think we need more hotel space in South Norwalk. I'm a little bit disappointed in this plan over the previous one that was approved because there was more meeting space. And I think that is really needed in South Norwalk, and a space for functions so that the limited use hotel, it does obviously serve a need in Norwalk, but it doesn't meet all of the needs I think that are out there for meeting and functional space. But we also are going to destroy two buildings that, as one who has lived here, studied, and researched, I understand a lot more about the cultural history regarding things like the Udelman building, about a Jewish immigrant who was thrown out of Russia and came to Norwalk and made it its home at the turn of the century and built a successful business. And we only have one other building that represents that, and that's the Canaan Baptist Church, the former temple, the Onion Dome building on Woodward Avenue. So it's always bothered me on the even on that other project. However, on the other project, we did negotiate and agree to some interpretive panels and representations about the buildings that were there and the people who inhabited them and why they mattered. And I don't see that here addressed at all. And I think that should be. That's the big hurdle for me to get over with all this. I mean, I think it's an attractive building. I mean, I've never seen anything that Beinfeld has done that I didn't like. I would want to make sure that all of our design reviewers' concerns are addressed, and I have confidence that can be worked out. I do think that I hear from the developer, they believe the two driveways is the best solution for them. I think it is our job to consider everybody else in the community, and for pedestrians and traffic on South Main and on Washington Street. I think we have to balance that. And I'm not an expert in traffic planning, but the design that BFJ showed the conflicts does make me nervous. And I do agree, people will want to be turned left. There'll be a lot of left turns going out of there to get back to 95. But that causes lots of congestion with traffic and pedestrians. So I do agree that the one driveway solution is the best for the city of Norwalk, for the pedestrians and for the traffic people. And I certainly respect the opinion of the developer that the dual driveway is best for their operations. But I think that it's our role to determine what's best for the city. So, I mean, with that, I think I'm rambling at this point.
Okay.
So.
Could I just say, David, thank you for your comments, because I think I'm struggling with the same issues, so I won't repeat it, but I appreciate what you've articulated. Thank you.
Thanks. Kelly, Lisa, do you want to weigh in any way? No. I guess David and Mary, will you be?
I do agree with what David and Mary's saying. I guess, like I said, I'm just kind of struggling myself. I guess just overall, I know like David was saying that, South Norwalk does need a hotel. I guess I'm just struggling. Is that the right place to put a second hotel? But I think all the concerns that Mary and David, express, I definitely agree with.
Okay.
I also struggle with the scale of the project so close to another hotel at the intersection.
Would everyone be okay if we allow the Mr. Fish and Mr. Rich to work this out and come up with the best plan that satisfies TMP and zoning. Is that an acceptable way to go, Mary?
I think we have to rely on our experts that are saying how to do this. But I would have liked maybe a more explicit addressing of what we're losing by demolishing those. And I feel like there should be some caveats that might influence future development because so it feels like it's there's not an appetite among any of us to say stop the project, but I think we all have a lot of misgivings. So doing that, I think trying to get the best solution and following the recommendations of the experts to try to respect the historical feel is probably the best we're going to do at this point. But it is a conflicted decision.
I agree. We're all feeling the same way, I believe. Shall I make a motion? Or David, do you look like you were going to say something? No?
I'm thinking. I appreciate what Mary says. Mary, are you comfortable that the issues that our professionals have brought up have been addressed?
I feel like I don't know enough of the details. The applicants are saying that one of the buildings has already been approved for a condemnation, so I don't even know if that's a subject. But the fact that issues about the other building weren't addressed, I would have at least liked them to have been addressed. But I also agree with you, David, that if there's going to be something new, that at least the design does take into account a lot of what is the intent behind the design regulations. It's also hard to see so many tall buildings going up in South Norwalk because that will also change the character. But so I'm weighing respecting history, but also, as you said, doing healthy economic development. So I don't know how to weigh that. But I feel like the issue before us is we've had consultants review this and present their recommendations. And I don't feel that we're necessarily the experts and we have to go with what the professional's done, but I would have liked a little bit more discussion about the considerations of historic preservation.
So what I would like to see, and the last thing in the world I want, I do respect the amount of investment, Mr. Rich, that you've made in all this. And you have a lot of good professionals here, and I know they're not inexpensive. So I'm not trying to drag it out, but what I think everyone is going to agree that we need to go to the single driveway solution. Going to the single driveway solution is going to change the design. I would want to see that design before I signed off on it. I would not be comfortable just saying, let the staff work that out. Number one. Number two, I agree with Mary. I don't think we've understood enough the second building. You know, we did approve the first building, the Alderman building, but I would like to see some proposal with regard to you know, some type of memorialization of those buildings and what they look like, and that incorporated somewhere into the designs of the new building, whether it be interpretive panels or probably at a minimum and something else. And I would like to see, you know, I would like to see a written response to the architectural issues that our design reviewer brought up, because those always seem to get lost at the end and we just approve it and they don't really ever seem to get addressed. So that's kind of where I'm at.
Okay. Sounds like we'd like the professionals to work together and come up with a plan that we approve at another meeting. Is that what I'm hearing?
That would make me more comfortable. And again, I am sensitive to everybody's time. If that is something that is, brought to us, I'm happy to attend a special meeting sooner rather than just wait to the next regular round. I think we're probably all happy to accommodate that. So
We would. Okay.
Mary, did I capture everything? Kelly, Lisa?
Well, Mr. Rich, I think you sense where we're coming from. And we'd like to expedite this, but we'd also like to see the plans that the experts come up with before we move it forward. Do you think that's doable? Can we do that? Everybody, I'm asking everybody. Okay.
From BFJ's point of view, that's fine. And I think we could do a meeting as soon as the end of this week. So it's up to Brian or other staff to coordinate that, I think.
Yeah,
Okay.
we're happy to coordinate as needed.
Can we expedite that, Brian?
Yeah, I mean, Friday's good for me. So if we could figure it out by then to start that process, we're happy to.
Okay.
Is the response that you seek the response to the BFJ memo of last week that we just saw tonight? Is that what you're looking for?
Yes.
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. I still haven't, I'd like to see a response. That was largely about the one driveway. I'd like to see a response on the architectural issues as well, a written response on that.
That was the
If I may add, I think what you said, David, also, if the applicant here does go with the one entrance in and out, then they're going to have an opportunity on the southern part of the building where the current exit is designed to design something there. And I'm not saying that should be interpretive panels but it's an opportunity for them to perhaps take a look at the historic fabric of the area and how it might be best, not retained, but best memorialized.
Okay. So do we table this to next month, or do we try to? I guess it's not going to move forward. So why don't we make a motion to table this to next month? But we're saying to everybody out there, please, work together and come up with a good plan. Obviously, a good plan, but a plan that works for everybody. Is that fair, David? Brian, you good with that?
Yep, I have the notes.
And I'm
Okay.
fine. Again, I'm
Mary,
fine.
are you comfortable with that?
Yeah, and I'm also willing to do a meeting sooner if you can get a quorum. So either way is fine with me.
Kelly, Lisa, you feel the same way?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I will also state that I'm, willing to meet at any time to move this along. Really want to move it along. So we're tabling this. Is there a motion to table this till the next meeting? So made by Mr. Westmoreland, seconded by Mary. All in favor? Yes, it's unanimous. That pretty much ends this part of the meeting. If everyone else wants to move on.
Thank you again for your time tonight, Mr. Chairman and members of the commission.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for all your patience. Thank you.
Thank you.
We have one other item here. And that's
There's
Where's-
actually 3 other items.
3 other items? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. O'Brien, you want to introduce the other items here?
Yeah. So the next on the agenda is just a general work program update. I'll keep it relatively brief. I want to be mindful of your time today. And happy to follow up with anything in terms of details afterwards if anything comes up. But just generally, we've been working on a number of fronts across the portfolio of our projects. I think that a lot of what's taking up a lot of our time these days is the work around the South Norwalk train station. So we've bid out that project. Some of you may be seeing some construction. The crews actually mobilized last week for the work to upgrade the water main along Chestnut Street. And that's obviously supportive of the development project over there at 1517 Chestnut. We've been concurrently working to bid out the remediation portion of that site. We're still working on an amendment to the land disposition agreement to accommodate the actual sequence that ended up as a result of some grant funds that we received over there. But that's all moving forward positively. We wrapped the project over at Columbus Court, so hopefully you've noticed the improvement over there with the new siding, new roofs, and all that work around the South Norwalk train station. We've been working actively on the South Norwalk Community Plan. Some of you participated or were involved in our initial kickoff meeting that occurred about a month ago at this point. We're gearing up to have the existing conditions analysis done and being able to deliver that within the next few weeks. And we'll be sure to keep you apprised of any opportunities for engagement and discussion around that plan. Apart from that, we're moving forward on the Pinnacle redevelopment, the utility works wrapping up. So we had a successful project over there. Some of the items that you'll see tonight are related to that. And I think in terms of large scale development projects, obviously the Webster Street lot project, we just wrapped up the financial analysis that we've been working on for a while. That's feeding into negotiations and the ultimate term sheet. And we'll talk a little bit more about that within the context of a couple items on the agenda tonight that are more administrative. I'll get into those later, but just for some of the grant funding that's related. Apart from that, obviously advancing all the grant management work that we're doing and the like. So those are sort of the high level projects that we're working on, but I'm happy to fill in any details or any questions that you may have.
Any questions?
Sorry. Any update on, I still call it the POCO building?
Yeah. Actually, that's a good point. Thank you for bringing that up. So yes, we've been actively working with the developer. They're still in the process of getting all their closing documents set. I think they're at, last I checked, we have a call every week actually on this, or every other week with DOH. That's sort of the final stage. They're about 90% complete with their closing checklist. And the word on the street is that we're looking at a mid-June closing with mobilization shortly thereafter. That's still in line with what I said last time. So again, as I also said last time, I'm cautiously optimistic on that project. But we have been involved and it is actively moving forward. Just given a deal that has been resurrected in its complexity, there's a lot of legal aspects, environmental confirmations that need to occur before closing that are currently underway.
So mid-June, I'm going to put together a pool on that, and I hope all of the commission participate. Thank you.
What's the over-under on that one, Dave? All right. So, you want me to go on to the next 2 items, John? I could take them in concert.
Yeah, go right ahead.
Okay. So these 2 resolutions, they're very long. So if you're okay with it, we'll just make sure that they're reflected in the record and not make you read them, John, but that's obviously up to you. But these are just really the belt and suspenders approach to grant management. We've talked about these grants in the past. We had some general authorizations to apply for them and use the funds, but we're in the process of finalizing and closing on the grant agreement. So I just wanted to make sure that we had a documented record of the language verbatim that the state likes to see. So the resolutions are related to the 2 grants we received for Webster Street lot, the $8 million community investment fund grant, and then the $3 million brownfield remediation grant. And I presented a common council, the Economic and Community Development Committee at their last meeting. In some ways, you know, with this grant, what you're doing, since we're kind of in advance of a finalized land disposition agreement, where, you know, since we were trying to be as proactive as possible to get the funds in place to help us with our negotiations and sort of solidify these funds. Effectively, these resolutions would allow us to execute the assistance agreements to solidify these funds to create a fixed point in our negotiations. We've worked with DECD, recognizing that we're still in an active negotiation, that they will put these funds in escrow for us. So we're signing a concurrent escrow agreement for these resources so that they will be available upon execution of a land disposition agreement. So we have some time to work things out still, but we just want to make sure that we have these funds set aside for us at the time and place when we're ready to move forward with the project.
Okay. So you're asking for the authorization. So there, I'll make a motion.
It's approved both resolutions, I would say. I think that
Both
probably.
on both resolutions
Yeah.
here. Basically authorizing the executive director to execute all documents required to implement the $2 million and some of the other grants. Is it seconded? We have several seconds. All in favor? Unanimous? That's good. Anything else?
The
Brian?
final one is just the OPM grant. I know we approved this, so this is again just administrative cleanup. Just want to make sure we have documented resolutions. This is for the sidewalk infrastructure investments that we received OPM funding for in relation to the Pinnacle redevelopment. We're just about to execute a design contract so that we're advancing that project since the other work that was funded under the Urban Act grant was completed. So now we're moving forward on the design phase for that $2 million grants, and we just wanted to make sure we had everything in place for the state. So this is just approval to execute agreements related to that grant.
Good. We have a motion. David moves it, I'll second it, all in favor? Aye. Unanimous. That's
all I
it.
have for you tonight, yeah.
Well, just to let everyone know that Brian is leaving on Saturday for German Berlin, and will be working from there for a while. So now is your chance to grab him with any questions.
And you'll always have access to me on demand. I'm just going to be plus 6 hours for a little bit. So, but
good.
To my phone if you need me.
And we can take you up on your offer to visit you in Berlin.
I will have the pretzels and beer ready for you, Mary.
October. Oh, okay. Anything else? Anyone want to bring up? So we're moving on to the next meeting. Do I have a motion to adjourn? David, everybody seconds it. Unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Take care.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.